Mara Rios liked to think of herself as a midwife for ghosts. The ghosts were not spirits or shades, merely memories, compressed, fragmented, often scrambled by the great flare, but still clinging to existence. Her work as a data hunter was to coax them back into life, assemble them into continuity, and offer them as proof that the world had once been bigger than the surviving villages, barter markets, and candlelit abbeys that dotted the post-flare Earth. 32 years had passed since the sun hissed with a coronal tantrum so violent that it peeled electrons from satellites, boiled servers, and blew out every unshielded circuit on the planet. The electromagnetic pulse tore through the global backbone like wildfire through dry wheat. Cloud archives went silent, nuclear power stations darkened, and the whole vocabulary of zeros and ones dissolved into incoherence. Within a week, humanity's collective digital memory, photographs, bank ledgers, medical histories, music libraries, navigation charts, had evaporated. Two infrastructures, however, survived. The first was entirely analog. Printed books stored in monasteries, schools, and old suburban libraries. The second was almost mythical. A constellation of experimental, radiation-hardened science satellites that had been intended to measure solar storms. Their builders, ironically, never thought Earth would need protection from the very phenomenon they studied, so the data caches aboard those satellites were an afterthought. But they had been designed with self-healing polymer chips and redundancy far beyond commercial standards. Rumor said that the caches were still up there, spinning in long, lonely orbits. Rumor, in other words, said that Mara's ghosts might yet have bodies waiting to be reborn. The monks of the Order of the Quill would have called that rumor heresy. Their abbey, Santuario de las Nubes, loomed over the Andean Altiplano like a basalt crown, its battlements wrapped in sun-whitened sheets of prayer flags. The Order's credo was unambiguously technophobic. The word bound to page is incorruptible. The word bound to circuit is smoke. After the flare, roving survivors donated or sold their printed possessions to the monks in exchange for food and sanctuary, and Santuario became the world's largest repository of pre-flare books. Illuminated manuscripts sat beside cheap paperback thrillers. Dog-eared chemistry textbooks slept next to atlases of drowned coastal cities. To the Order, the collection was both temple and barricade. They feared that any new digital resurrection might bring a second Babel, a renewed dependence on the false immortality of bits. So they sealed their library from anyone who suggested scanning or transcription, which was precisely why Mara needed to break in. Because one of those books, she had narrowed it down to a logbook written by a defunct research consortium, was rumored to contain the authentication key and orbital ephemeris for Solar Lexus 9, the most sophisticated of the hardened satellites. If she could reach that satellite, she could download a redundant archive said to include full copies of world literature, genomic databases, and the last comprehensive star maps. It was, she believed, the single largest intact digital storehouse left to humanity. To reclaim it, she first needed the logbook, and to get the logbook, she needed to outwit the monks. The hardest journeys begin with small humiliations. To cross the monastery's front gate, she spent 3 weeks apprenticing under an herbalist caravan so that she could pose as a supplier of medicinal yerba and Andean gentian. The caravan leaders took her knives as collateral against theft. To keep her disguise, she cut her hair into a blunt monastic bob and let dust cake her boots. Along mountain switchbacks, she silently rehearsed the lines she would use when she reached the gate. I carry balm for those in contemplation. Books deserve healthy guardians. The gatekeeper listened politely, sniffed the crates of herbs, then waved her through. No weapons, no machines, no questions about data. The monks trusted simple barter. It almost disappointed her. She had prepared elaborate lies. They were unnecessary. Inside, Santuario smelled of old paper and beeswax. Corridors curved around inner courtyards, where citrus trees grew behind latticed stone screens. Monks in rough brown habits shuffled past, eyes downcast, mouth whispering verses from dog-eared psalters. The moment she entered the central scriptorium, the hum of human voices quieted her breath. Shelves arched upward, like the ribs of a wooden whale, carrying tens of thousands of volumes. Some bindings had cracked into fossil patterns. Others gleamed with gold leaf. No single librarian could catalog the trove. Each monk specialized in a section, memorizing both location and content. Mara's quarry, the logbook, belonged to Brother Abel, guardian of works on the wild heavens, a niche full of pre-flare astrophysics. Brother Abel was a stooped man with skin the color of dried maize. He greeted Mara with subdued courtesy. "Your eyes travel faster than your feet," he remarked, catching her glance across multiple shelves. "I enjoy wandering, brother," she answered, coating her voice with rural innocence. "The stars have been my companions on the road. I hoped to read what your library says about them." His lips twitched. Pride or suspicion? She couldn't decide. "The stars are constant," he said. "Books remind us so." "May I?" He led her to a reading cubicle. Narrow desk, unlit oil lamp, strict time limit. With gloved hands, he placed a text before her. Astrophysics primer for the serious amateur. Not the logbook. She would need patience. Days passed. She proposed to fix roof leaks, grind ink, even illuminate chapter headings in exchange for reading privileges. Routine built familiarity. Familiarity bred trust. Finally, Brother Abel let her follow when he unlocked a gated alcove deeper in the stacks. There, on a cedar shelf, was the object of her pilgrimage, Project Athenium, Orbital Instruments Log, 2090-2093. She felt a tingling surge, half reverence, half adrenaline. The book was less than 3 centimeters thick, bound in blue polymer. It would contain the satellite's fallback passphrases, firmware checksums, and the encrypted GPS offsets needed to synchronize an uplink. Exactly the keys to Solar Lexus 9. She forced herself to breathe evenly, while Abel paged through the preface. "A curiosity," he said. "It documents machines, but itself is free of machine. We keep it as metaphor." "Machines die," Mara replied, following the order's dogma. "Indeed," he said, satisfied. Then he closed the book and returned it to its niche. The next step called for theft. At midnight, she slipped from her assigned cell, padded barefoot across mosaic floors, and reached the alcove door. The lock was simple mechanical steel, pickable with a shaved quill and the tension of a candle snuffer. She had just coaxed the last tumbler when someone murmured behind her, "You move like a hunting cat, sister." She spun. A young monk, maybe 25, leaned against a pillar. His cowl shadowed pale eyes that seemed almost amused. "Brother Elias," he supplied, seeing her glance at his belt where a name token hung. "I couldn't sleep," she improvised. "Books comfort me." Elias studied the open lock between her fingers. "So comforting that you break rules?" Mara's throat tightened. She could stab him with her improvised pick and flee with the logbook, but that would murder a bystander and paint a target on her forever. Instead, she gambled on truth, or at least a version of it. "I came for knowledge your order refuses to use," she whispered. "The world outside is starving for memory. There's a satellite whose archive could rebuild medicine, engineering, art. Everything that was lost." Elias's brow furrowed. "You mean to resurrect the digital?" I mean to preserve humans from ignorance. Read, she said, touching the door. See what your elders hide. Curiosity warred with indoctrination. He took her lockpick, weighed it like a moral scale. Then sighed. I should summon Brother Superior. Yet I fear the scourge of silence more. He opened the door and gestured inward. 10 minutes. Inside, Mara found the logbook and angled it toward moonlight from a clear-story window. Handwritten marginalia offered full-access sentences. In case of ground network failure, use secondary hash, Trinity Eco 7. Coordinates for line-of-sight uplinks were scribbled beside high-latitude pass windows. She traced every line into her notebook, compressing hours of research into frantic shorthand. Elias watched, silent but shaking. When she finished, she returned the book precisely where it belonged. Lock relatched. Hallway slept on. You have what you need? He asked. Yes, and a debt to you. He frowned. If you fail, I also fail. The Order hunts both of us. Then come, she said, before she fully understood the invitation. Help me persuade the world that knowledge is not sin. Elias looked back toward the monk's dormitory. Candlelight flickered under a door. I have lived in footnotes, he murmured. Perhaps it is time to write my own chapter. He followed her. By dawn, they were miles from Santuario. Word of the theft spread faster than they traveled. Monastic outriders on trained llamas shadowed the passes, vowing to recapture their apostate brother and the dangerous woman. Mara and Elias moved at night, crossed glacier tongues, traded herbs for passage among Aymara shepherds, and finally reached the abandoned Condor Ridge Observatory, a steel skeleton perched atop a plateau above the cloud deck. Before the flare, Condor Ridge had served as one of 3 control stations for the solar Lexus constellation. Solar panels still angled skyward, though cracked like dried riverbeds. A cluster of parabolic dishes pointed uselessly at empty frequencies. They needed one of those dishes aligned to intercept the satellite's next overhead arc, scheduled, according to her stolen ephemeris, for precisely 1944 local time, 4 days hence. Elias gawked at the equipment. Looks like the ribcage of some iron beast. It was a beast of science, Mara said, prying open a control cabinet. Inside, corroded circuits stank of ozone, but spare parts had been sealed in anti-static wrap. She set about resurrection, cleaning contacts, soldering bypass lines with a propane microtorch, coaxing energy from panels into a refurbished battery bank. Elias, though nervous, proved dexterous. He rewound copper wire where rodents had nested, recited psalms about creation while tightening bolts, and asked quietly whether gods could inhabit silicon. On the 3rd day, onyx storm clouds stacked along the western horizon. Lightning signaled rising geomagnetic agitation. A lesser flare, still potent enough to eat unshielded gear, might arrive concurrently with the satellite pass. Timing became existential. Mara grounded the dish array into bedrock and wrapped sensitive modules in makeshift Faraday cages of chicken wire. If the world taught any lesson, it was that the sun had teeth. Night of Reckoning. 1930. The dish, 60 meters of mesh, creaked as its motors realigned to azimuth 192, elevation 78. Mara crouched in the cracked control room, her tablet a modified e-paper slate, powered by supercapacitors. She typed the mnemonic, Trinity Echo 7. A blinking prompt cleared, frequencies locked. Carrier tone chirped through speakers like whale song. They were talking. After 3 decades of silence, Earth whispered to machinery orbiting 800 kilometers overhead. Packet flood commenced. Checksums confirmed. Then a second display erupted in crimson. Solar activity warning, CME in progress. Mara's pulse hammered. If the flare struck before download completion, not only would they lose the archive, but the satellite's final functional processor might fry, erasing all possibility of future contact. Her ghosts would die permanent deaths. She keyed a forced dump protocol, compress, strip parity, bypass non-essential metadata, and shouted to Elias, "We need shielding." Outside, wind clawed at the shack. He lugged aluminum emergency blankets from a supply crate, draped them over windows, then knelt, offering a prayer that sounded suspiciously like raw pleading to any deity capable of magnetospheric deflection. Data logs scrolled, 18%, 27%, 41%. The room's fluorescent tubes flickered as geomagnetic currents bled into the power lines. Fat blue sparks leapt between grounding straps. Mara bit her lower lip so hard she tasted blood, refusing to blink. 64%, 73%, 88%. A thunderclap hit simultaneous with a white flash that plunged the observatory into darkness. The battery inverters screamed and died. Monochrome screen went black. Silence swallowed them. Elias, heartbroken, whispered, "Is it gone?" Mara's fingers shook as she reached for the slate. Its e-ink display, immune to sudden loss of power, still rendered the last completed line. Download complete. Archive stored. CRC pass. Timestamp. 1943-57. They had finished 3 seconds before the grid failed. She laughed. A ragged animal sound. "We have it." She hugged Elias, startling them both. But elation gave way to caution. The archive now resided in the slate's solid-state core. 150 terabytes of compressed cultural DNA, but entirely digital. One well-aimed club could smash it. Even she admitted digital alone was fragile. So she had prepared contingency. A portable microfilm printer, rigged to an optical head salvaged from an old photolithography kit. It could etch minuscule QR layers onto archival polymer, a medium readable with magnifying lenses, and safe from electromagnetic wrath. Slow but permanent. For 14 straight hours they powered the printer with bicycle cranks. Each reel preserved roughly a gigabyte. They produced 50 before exhaustion claimed them. They now possessed, in analog form, the complete works of Shakespeare, the Merck Medical Index, star charts, and more. Morning revealed the extent of the geomagnetic storm. Transformers blown, telephone wires sagging, but no catastrophic global repeat of the Great Flare. A glancing hit merely. Still, it validated the monk's caution. Digital alone, suchquacked smoke. Elias asked the inevitable question. "What now?" Mara brushed hair from her grime-streaked face. "We bring the reels to the world. Libraries, hospitals, universities, whatever is left of them. The digital seed stays with me for duplication. Redundancy is salvation." "Will Santuario let that happen?" "Unlikely. But not all monks think alike." She eyed him. "I will speak," he said softly. "The Order's oath is to truth on paper. We have paper enough to hold this truth." Travel back was slower. The trail buzzed with patrol rumors. Some said marauders in ex-military trucks patrolled for relic tech. Others said the Order had issued writs of excommunication. At the foot of the monastery spur, Mara and Elias confronted a cordon of monks led by Brother Abel himself. His eyes settled on the bulky satchel of microfilm reels. "You stole words dressed as demons," he accused. "I retrieved them from angels," Mara countered. Abel's gaze flicked to Elias. "And you, brother, broke vow of stability." Elias stepped forward. "Our vow binds us to preserve wisdom, not to bury it. I witnessed wonders, a machine in the sky still singing. We recorded its song onto film no flare can silence. Judge our actions, not our tools." Abel's jaw worked. Around him, younger monks murmured. They had grown up hearing only rumors of the digital age. Now, physical evidence lay at their feet. Finally, Abel extended his palms. Show me. Mara unspooled a segment under the morning sun. Microscopic glyphs sparkled, where light refracted through dense patterns. She handed him a magnifying loupe. He peered, swallowed, and whispered, "We hold these truths to be self-evident." He looked up, tears in weathered eyes. "I have not read that in years. It survived?" "In orbit, yes," Mara said, "and now on film." The old monk closed the loop. Perhaps the word bound to circuit can be transubstantiated into ink. He turned to his companions. "Brothers, our creed demands adaptation or ossification. Which serves humanity?" Silence held. Then a novice nodded. Another placed his staff on the ground, a gesture of open mind. The cordon parted. Santuario's council convened that afternoon in the refectory. Debate raged. Technology as savior or tempter, stewardship or blasphemy. Mara spoke of hospitals lacking antibiotic formularies, of engineers guessing bridge tolerances, of teachers reciting folk memories instead of mathematics. Elias argued scripture, talents buried versus talents invested. Abel quoted Ecclesiastes, reminding them that silence has a season, but so does speaking. By dusk, a compromise emerged. Microfilm copies of the archive would remain in Santuario's vault under dual guardianship, monks and lay scholars. In return, Mara would train a cadre in optical duplication so the reels could seed satellite monasteries worldwide. Digital access would be permitted only within shielded scriptoria, monitored by both factions. That night, candles burned past midnight as monks lined up to view the first illuminated slide, a high-resolution image of Botticelli's Primavera. Gasps filled the hall. Some crossed themselves, others simply wept. Beauty, thought lost, bloomed anew on a screen of linen stretched over an oak frame. Mara watched from a shadowed corner, exhaustion draped across her shoulders like an old blanket. She felt neither triumphant nor absolved, only aware of how precarious any victory over oblivion remained. Another flare could still smite satellites. A tyrant could still torch libraries. The war for memory had no final battle. Elias found her there. "You look worried." "I see the next 1,000 tasks," she admitted. "We need regional repositories, solar-proof vaults, translation crews." He placed 2 fingers on her wrist. "One chapter at a time, remember? Tonight, the ghosts have voices." She exhaled. "Voices," she repeated, savoring the word. Voices that could argue, mourn, dream, warn, and celebrate. Voices that might prevent civilization from stumbling blind into repeat catastrophes. Voices that, for the moment, were safe. Outside, night air smelled of wet stone and lavender. Above, the sky glittered with stars as indifferent as ever. Somewhere up there, Solar Lexus 9 orbited in patient silence, its caches lighter by 150 terabytes, but still brimming with more. It would outlast them all, a mechanical monk chanting hymns of data to whichever descendants cared to listen. Mara touched the hardened slate tucked beneath her coat. A seed in winter soil, she thought, and like any seed, its destiny depended on gardeners willing to risk both storm and sun. She began planning her next expedition before she had even slept.